Great to see you all. I'm Kimberly. If you don't know me, I know so many of you, and I encourage you to, if you'd like, go ahead and put this in gallery view so we can really see the community and you're not just looking at my face. We'll give us a few minutes to settle in here. Yeah. If you know me and you've been in these talks with me, you know I love to locate us all in time and space and really roll the red carpet out from my heart to yours and to each other. So I invite you to use the chat box. I love a good chat box, and go ahead and put your location of where you are in the chat box. I'll start out. I am in my new favorite place in the world, Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. And yes, we have Chicago, Iowa, London, Ontario. Hi, Ryan. Hi, Roman in Germany. More Germany. Slovenia. Catherine in Victoria, BC. Hello. Joshua Tree. Hi, Mara. Alon in BC. Good to always have you. Maine, LA. Ashland, Oregon. Dublin, Ireland. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, give me a wave if you've got some Irish in you, spiritually or otherwise. Boulder, Colorado, Independence, Virginia, uh, Earth, yes, and Maine and North Carolina. And how wonderful is that? And it's beautiful to feel we're all in different times. We're all in different spaces. And yet we're coming together in this present moment here. And even that feels like a miracle. It sure does, yeah. And good to see the rest of you who I didn't shout out. I can definitely feel you. And also welcome to those of you who will be listening to this in the future. We call you in and feel you here as well and welcome you. So let's see, Chrisanne, why don't you go ahead and read for us. I'll take over the admittance and you read for us our welcome here if you could. Hey, Joel.
All right.
Hey, Phil.
Welcome to this ASI community gathering, and we're really glad you're here. And welcome to any new members who have recently joined ASI. These community webinars are here to support our members and our mission of spiritual integrity. We ask participants to stay connected, accountable, sensitive, and skillful when engaging today. We ask that you agree to create and maintain safe space for learning and growth. To that end, we'll refrain from marketing or self-aggrandizing while avoiding inflammatory or deliberately destructive comments. If you want to recommend a relevant or appropriate resource to attendees, please do so in the chat box. ASI will remove participants who engage in harmful activity after one warning. Thank you for creating this community with us, showing up with presence, attunement, and self-awareness.
Thank you. So just let's breathe in and out with that. Presence, attunement, and self-awareness. And when we say presence, what I mean by that is an embodied presence. It's something you can feel, I can feel in our whole body, maybe from the top of your head down to the ends of your fingers and your toes, and maybe even beyond that. Maybe your body is even bigger than that. Fully present in this moment. And when we say attunement, what we mean at the ASI is listening, but it's a very powerful listening. It's a sort of listening that is beyond the words. It's a listening to the wordless guidance that we have, and maybe listening deeply and being aware of any internal dialogue that we may have. In a sense of self-awareness, a sort of witnessing and vision, a way of seeing ourselves and others with compassion, care, and wisdom. Yeah. So this is an open community discussion. I have a few notes to sort of guide us along the way, but in no way am I lecturing or telling anybody what to think or feel about this topic. Interestingly, this topic, money and spiritual guidance and spiritual education, is one of the most registered. We've had the most people register for this of almost anything, I believe. So it tells us, it's great feedback for us that this topic is really of interest to our community and is something that we want to discuss. So very grateful for that. I think maybe we can begin by bringing some self-awareness to any qualities or constructs we have around the idea of money. So when I say money, what pops up into your mind? What qualities or characteristics pop up into your mind when I say money? And go ahead and put them in the chat box. Maybe it's social construction that you've inherited from your culture or your family. Maybe it's individual meaning making or individual construction you have around it. Ooh, I love this beginning. Scarcity versus abundance, resource, power, greed, energy, life, green energy. Keep it going. And the purpose of this is I want us to begin to just bring to awareness any, Connie must be here, any shadow material, there she is, we have around money, because money is one of those the areas that we can be pretty shadowy about, right? We can perhaps have unconscious interjects. We can project a lot of things onto money. Good, keep it going. I love this. So greed, suffering, inequality, survival, inequality, limited, uncertain, dirt, trigger for limiting beliefs, freedom, risk. Wow. Limits, bad, shame in childhood, class background. Yeah. Necessary evil. Interesting, right? Okay. Beautiful. Thank you for jumping into and playing with me in this. Makes everything possible. Abundance. So necessary evil or abundance and makes everything possible? Which is it really? And if your mind went to sort of a neutrality or an emptiness, perhaps, that's a good thing. Because money as a quality or a construct is actually neutral. It's just an idea. And how we see it is based on our conditioning, right? But money itself isn't inherently good or bad, abundant or scarce, right? It's a concept, it's a quality that are ideas and constructions and is making meaning around. And this is good. This isn't a bad thing. This is good. So just beginning with that awareness, right? Beginning with that awareness that money itself is an empty construct, a neutral construct. It has the potential to be used for good. It has the potential to be used for negativity. But if we don't dredge out any shadow constructs around it, a lot of trouble can be caused. Yeah. So is money spiritual? Is it not spiritual? What do you think? So let's begin because I don't want to talk too long. Well, I'll come back and we'll do some framing. Let's begin maybe with opening the space, some open space of why are you here? What are you interested in about this topic? And go ahead and raise your hand. You could use the button at the bottom of your screen to raise your hand. I can't remember where it is now. When I'm in this flow, I lose technical capacity. But go ahead and raise your hand. Oh, Rick, thanks for jumping off. Let us know what's on your mind.
I'm always shooting my mouth off.
I love it.
So I don't know, I was just thinking as you're talking that a lot of times when I want to buy some gadget like a webcam or something, I see various ones and I automatically think that the more expensive one is probably the better one, you know? And I don't know if that's necessarily the case. But I know with spiritual teachers, there are people who just don't feel good in their hearts about charging exorbitant prices, and there's others who, will charge $500 an hour or something to talk to people. And I'm very skeptical that anybody's getting $500 worth out of such a conversation. And in fact, as as somebody who interviews a lot of these people, we won't interview people who charge that kind of money because we just feel there's something ethically compromised about it. But as an old TM teacher, it was our direct experience that if people didn't pay their course fee, there was a chance they weren't going to show up for the 3 days or 4 days of instruction. And so they had to have some kind of commitment, some kind of, I'm investing something in this. And of course, as teachers, we needed to eat and pay rent and stuff like that. So the money was a necessity. So I don't know. That covers a few points which other people might want to springboard off of.
So much in there. Who wants to jump in next? Open space.
I've completely forgotten how to raise my hand. So if someone could send me something in chat so I can do it next time. But I'm interested in the range of opinions about this and the level of confidence that people have in their own response.
Huh. Yeah. I'm interested in that too. Thank you, Denise. And we'll make sure and capture that. And we also will make sure, I'll make a request to our team here to save this chat conversation. And when we publish this, we will be, providing this talk on our website. Let's also make sure we publish the chat if we can, because there already is such a range, right, on this empty idea of money. Yeah. And Rick, I do want to come back to some of those points too, and we will. Jeff, love to hear from you.
Yeah, thank you for holding this conversation. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay, good. Full disclosure, I am driving. So several questions that come to my mind. So what, I mean, I can get very philosophical. First of all, what is spirituality as opposed to other services, if you will? We don't question, and money is a means of exchange. It's like, so we don't question, and I will say also, I want to preface this with, I have a lot of concerns about the whole concept of charging money for spirituality. But the questions are, but why do we look at that any differently than any other? If I grow chickens and I sell eggs, like there's an exchange that takes place. So the question is, why would we? A, what is spirituality in the first place? I'm not sure we even often really look at that. B, is it a different form of exchange than anything else? And then C is, and this is just me musing, if we think of like barter economies, where your money is that way to make exchange convenient, because it's easier. I don't know, it makes it easier. But what if I, as a spiritual teacher, and I'm not sure, frankly, I identify as one, but what if I only accepted goods and services? Like, what would it look like if I cut money out of it? Would that change some of the dynamics? Would I have to kind of negotiate differently? Would I have to think differently about the exchange than putting an actual dollar value on it? And I just think it would be curious. And I will tell you, even this conversation made me think, in today's society, do we have to have money? Or are there still ways, even in modern America, that one could choose to say, I am only going to live through a direct barter exchange economy because I just think money makes it more complicated? So those are just questions that come to me.
Great. Great. I love these inquiries and love these questions. Thank you so much. And we will come back and sort of look before it's over today, we'll look at fees versus donation, the risk of work trade, legal issues that come up, all of those sorts of things we'll also talk through. Hey, Marty, love to hear from
Hi.
you.
Yeah, the thing that's most present for me in this that the sort of question or frame that's coming up is sort of an equity question. And I think about this in two ways. I have an access equity question around, how do we look at what access really means, what contributions really mean, within fundraising. It's like, okay, what's a personally significant contribution? Within the church I grew up in, it was about tithing, right? Which was a way to say 10% of what I have is different than what 10% of a billionaire has, that sort of thing. But there's this other part of equity that comes up for me in thinking about this, which is equitable compensation of the labor of the spiritual leader, right? It isn't just about the equitable access and how much we can afford, but also how do spiritual leaders, like, how is there equity in their compensation? And then can we build like a beautiful triangle around that? Is a big question that I have. Yeah.
Beautiful, thank you. Yes, these are the issues. Stacy.
Hi. So, in past work I've done with holistic practitioners, spirituals, leaders, teachers, and guides in discussions around money, a couple things have come up in terms of like the core issue. And one is people who feel that they have spiritual gifts or divine gifts, questioning whether because they are spiritual and divine gifts, whether they then have the right to charge for the service that they're providing. Is it spiritually okay? And then, if I could just for a moment go down the ladder into the woo-woo wonderland, uh, for those who believe in past lives, many people who are spiritual or holistic providers today have also been so in the past. And they've had really traumatic experiences trying to deliver their service in the world in those past lives. Bad things have happened to them. They've been shunned, they've been killed, and whatever. And on some very deep cellular subconscious level, there's this belief that if I charge for my services, I'm really putting myself out there in the world. And if I do that, and this brings up the fear trigger, if I do that, will bad things happen to me again? So I just wanted to share those thoughts with everyone.
Thank you for sharing, Stacy. Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else want to jump in there? Go ahead, Rick.
Okay. I'm only going to raise my hand if nobody else has raised it, just to keep the ball rolling, but I have a bunch of more points to throw into the stew here. Another argument we used to use as TM teachers was, you don't pay for the water that comes out of your tap. You pay for the infrastructure that brought you the water, the pipes, the water purification, all that physical stuff. So, no one's paying for pure consciousness or God or whatever you get out of your spiritual practice. But, there's an infrastructure that's needed to bring it to you, so to speak, or to support the teacher who you interact with. Okay. Second point, Amma says that charging for meditation is like a mother charging for mother's milk. But then she has a whole infrastructure that brings in, hundreds of millions of dollars. And so she can give away meditation for free, but people donate like crazy. On the barter point, I can't imagine going to the grocery store and offering them I don't know, something something in exchange for today's groceries. So they're going to want money. There's a guy I interviewed who's Tom Thompson will know who this is, whose interview I subsequently took down, who argued vehemently that no spiritual teacher should charge for money. And I said, so Adyashanti is supposed to like work at a job all day and then in the evening start teaching, and there's only so many hours in the day. And he was adamant. He apparently was financially self-sufficient. But that was his attitude, and I don't agree with it. Some teachers are generous in offering scholarships, complete scholarships or work exchange scholarship, where you come to the retreat and wash the dishes or something. You don't have to pay. So that's an option. And then there are some teachers, two that I can think of, which I'm tempted to name. I will, David Hoffmeister and a guy named Sat Shri, who have talked people into giving them their entire life savings. And then when the person realized it was a big mistake, they've had a real hard time getting it back. And I'm talking about like $900,000 in one case. And I took down both of their interviews. So like sex, I think money can cloud a person's judgment if there's too much of it available. And it's been the downfall of some teachers. Anyway, so there's another bunch of ingredients for the conversation.
Fantastic. Great ingredients. Great ingredients. Go ahead, Marnie.
Hi, yeah, thank you. It's interesting. I first came across this event in your calendar at a time that coincided with another event, which was I thought coincidental? Not necessarily. We know that's not coincidence, but I was speaking with a friend and we were talking about the fees that doctors charge. Now, I know they're not necessarily spiritual practitioners, but they practice medicine. And we were wondering, it's when someone sets a price for something, a doctor, let's say, and then a new doctor or new physician comes into that same space, right? And let's say relatively new, but it's got all those years of paying for medical school and blah, 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 blah. And the thought was, well, if they're charging that much, then I can charge that much. So to me, that really felt like a lack of freedom on the person who was coming into this milieu for the first time. It's not, what's my worth? It's, well, they're doing that, so then I can do this. And I think truthfully, all we have to do is look around at what doctors charge these days, in this country anyway. And it just goes up. And yes, there's all kinds of things with insurance, and I understand all of that, but irrespective of that, my question was, where's the freedom of the individual in making a decision like that and charging based on what market value is? And then to Rick's point earlier, just about barter, I kind of agree. I don't really think you can go to a store and say, I'll give you this for that. I don't think that would fly. But there are companies that do give away that, I mean, very successfully, like the Vipassana system. You go and they give everything, and it's all based on donation, and that has worked well. So it can work. That's not really barter, but then they don't expect you, but you kind of want to come back and volunteer if you can, if you get to go back a second time. Anyway, that's all I wanted to contribute.
Love it, Marnie. And Jeff and Wallace, I see you, and Rhonda and Linda, and yay, and I'll come back to you in a minute. So different models that are out there. The one is don't charge, it's free, right? And in those cases, whether it's the individual or it's the system, whether it's, an individual or the organization holding it, it's based on donations, right? So many of us have gone to free Dharma talks, for example, or free spiritual talks, and it's free and you don't pay anything. And then there's a big pitch, right? There's some sort of pitch for funds and donations. So that's one model. And I'm totally generalizing. Of course, there's multiple exceptions. So just bear with me on the generalizations, okay? So there's free spiritual teachings, which are often donation based, right? There's fee, FEE teachings, right? Where it's very clear. You pay $250, you come to this weekend retreat, and you pay for something, you get something. And that's very cut and clear. And one distinction between these two is just, again, I'm obviously going to have my own experiences, my own biases, acknowledging all of that, right? So I'm speaking to you as Kimberly with her own experiences, not as the ASI in particular. But one thing that many of us has found is when teachings are free, Rick mentioned this earlier, and it's say a certification, some sort of training where you're actually learning material and getting material. Oftentimes people don't show up or they take it less seriously if you're not paying for it. Not always, totally generalizing, but that often is there. So there's free, there's fee, and then there's this idea of work trade. Now, the issue with work trade where, okay, you don't pay anything, but you have to volunteer, you have to do work. I've utilized that different eras, different times in my life, and recently have learned, and some of you here can really speak to this much more than I can, there's legal issues with work trade. Because if you ask, and I just want you to know this as spiritual teachers and leaders, if you ask somebody to work for you for free, and even if they're getting access to the teachings, you know, even if they're coming and cooking at the Vipassana retreat or whatever else they're doing, if they cross state lines, it's apparently how cults are getting identified is free labor. So there's legal issues because we live in a legal system, like it or not, at least in the States and in other areas, we live in a system where, you know, a legal system, whether we agree with it or not. And so there's legal issues with asking people to do work trades or to volunteer and do work that one has to be aware of, especially if they're crossing state lines. Okay, so something to be aware of with money and spirituality. There's also this idea of sacred economics. And Charles Eisenstein is the one that often gets you know, the credit for, and some of you know more about this than I do, I'm sure, of utilizing this idea, you know, where it's focused on more the gift economy and recognizing it, the system as a whole of, you know, providing the teacher with something based, often it's a sliding scale. You pay what you can afford, or you offer your gifts, or sometimes you offer services. And it's not so much an exchange, it's keeping the larger system in mind. And others here can speak much more to this, I'm sure, than I can. I am not an expert in Eisenstein in the least, but that's another idea. So somehow, you know, and I have, as Kimberly, as a spiritual teacher and leader for a long time, as somebody who ran a nonprofit training yoga teacher education for a very long time, I've used all of these and still finding my way forward about what is the most ethical way forward. And I think no matter what we're doing, we have to be transparent with it. You know, transparency in all ways, with our students, with ourselves, checking with our peers, which is what we're doing here, and finding the best practices going forward. And I'm sure there are other models too. So just putting a little frame around what we're talking about. Okay. So Jeff, go ahead and jump in there.
Well, I have a new thought, but I actually would rather, I hope I can get it in later, but I'd rather defer to folks who have not spoken yet, because I did.
You're muted,
Oh,
Kimberly.
sorry. Oh, thank you, Jeff. That was kind of you. Wallace, I have you up next here. And Wallace, you are muted as well, my friend. Yes. There you go.
I just thought I'd come in and share my experience around spirituality and money. I work as a spiritual teacher in Dublin, in Ireland, and I have a small spiritual community, both online and in the real world. And it's founded on what I call unconditional love. And one of the principles of unconditional love for me is that it's love that's given without conditions. And that means that money cannot be involved other than by donation. Because if somebody has to pay €100, say, to speak to me as a spiritual teacher, then that's a condition. To speak to me, they have to pay money. And in the beautiful spiritual community that I have, the energy is absolutely wonderful, and there's great healing takes place. And I'm convinced it's because of this energy of unconditional love that runs right through the whole community. For example, because people don't have to pay anything to see me, and I have a team of facilitators, and they work on the basis of unconditional love as well, and they're trained to do that. So when somebody comes along and wants to contact me or one of the facilitators, they do so at the time that's right for them. You know, and the timing is always perfect. And that means that conversation is highly creative because they're coming in when the need is greatest. And it's beautiful and it works. And now to address the important point of how do you support yourself, right? Well, I have written ebooks and all of this stuff to help people. If they're interested, it's on my website. I won't put it out there because even though I don't charge for it, it's promoting, and you don't want me to do that. But I have written ebooks on this, and how we do it is I have an ebook that guides people on how to become financially free by, over the course of their life, gradually using money as a spiritual practice, and the mastery of money as a spiritual practice, and the challenge of that as very real challenges in your life that you can use to grow as a person. So people get to a point where they've mastered the money in their life, and they've got more and more freedom as time goes on to offer their time, as they do initially as facilitators and then as spiritual teachers, to this community. And it's absolutely beautiful, and it really works. And it works in the modern world where we have all these kind of issues, you know?
Thank you. Thank you so much, Wallace. I'm so glad you're here. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Hi, I love that Wallace went before me because I have like the opposite experience. Yeah, so I had an experience when I was young, single digits, I don't know how old I was, where I told my dad I wanted to be a psychologist. I'm sure that's just how I translated whatever, was coming through me, and his immediate response was, "There's no money in that." And I took that in and have had a really hard time. Someone had mentioned in the chat about like child shame in childhood. I've had a really hard time like I guess dropping that belief. It got really anchored. And so then when I have charged, I've worked outside the system. I haven't been like my training, what I do is not like within a particular system. It's been like challenge after challenge, and part of that has been the belief that I took on. So, and I'm aware of that, but it's really, it's been very reflective to me of like whatever it is that became our reality, early on, and how that plays out in our perceptions and actions, and gets reflected back to us. So and then the conflict that like there's so much conflict around charging, not charging, blah blah, how much, what's right, there's no money in that, like and just kind of recreating that belief that there's no money in it because of the conflict. So that's been like a fascinating journey. And so I'm really open to, I'm like soaking this up like a sponge, and I love that this conversation is happening. And I love what Wallace shared. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rhonda. Great to hear from you. Remembering that money is a neutral thing. It's not inherently good or bad from its own side. We're in a system. Each one of us gives money to what we value. Putting aside, these free, beautiful, free, by donation only models, we pay for what we value, right? We pay for what we value. So what does that say about what we value in our spirituality or not? And are there new ways to think about all of these things as well? That's ethical, right? That's ethical as well. I'll just throw in here too, many spiritual teachers that I know have it was an instant enlightenment that happened one time and they're now transmitting. They did spend years going to various places around the world, learning the material, much longer than you learn to be a medical doctor in many cases, in long retreat, years and years and years of their own resources to create these things. And then do we expect them to give it for free, right? So I'm being a little edgy here on purpose, right? For us to think about these things as well. Linda, you want to jump in there?
Sure. Can you hear me? Okay. I feel like I have a lot to say. And so I don't want to talk too long, so I'm just going to say a few things and see what happens. This is a subject that I've spent a great deal of focus on because I think it's important. And my background is I had a 50-year career as a counselor and psychotherapist and eventually spiritual guide, kind of, Wilderness Quest guide and different kinds of things. And as unfoldment would have it, I had a huge, big change in my own life about 40 years ago. And yeah, and so then the spiritual life became big and prominent for me. And it's all very beautiful and fascinating. And, I'm not going to go into that too much, but about money. I feel like, my own experience and my own process has shown me that context is extremely important in understanding anything about money. And, whether we're talking about personal context, like our own lives, or whether we're talking about the society in which we all move about, where I'm in the US and money is top of mind for lots of people. It's a very important thing. It's considered to give people value. The more money they have, the more valuable they are. That's just the nature of our society. And I think it's very important to remember that. And I also, there's all of that. I can talk about that, but I want to also speak personally, which is I come from a family that struggled to have enough money. And so I experienced early on the not having enough money. My parents didn't have it. It was frightening not to have enough money. And so that created a whole environment within me of not only not being afraid of not having enough money, but also there was another side to it, which was this idea that money was bad, because politically we were very progressive. And so we were not out to just make a lot of money. That wasn't considered the right value. And so I came into my adulthood and I was carrying a belief that money is bad. And I didn't know that. And so when I began working with people, that was operating somewhat unconsciously, but also the other thing that was operating was my feeling that healthcare is a right, that people deserve their healthcare, that people deserve to be cared for. and that people deserve to be supported in their development in life, period. End of conversation, whether there's any money involved or not. Needless to say, I mean, I could go on about it, but needless to say, it was all very confusing. So I spent many years working on this personally. I mean, I went into a deep process directly related to the issue of money. And I discovered all my attitudes, and some of which I knew, some of which I didn't. I discovered that I had been kind of mean to money, that I didn't really have enough respect for money or for myself. There were just so many things that happened, and I looked into all the different spiritual modalities, and shamanism, for example, and the indigenous, a shaman in the indigenous environment has a trade or a job, something that the person does. And then the gifts of spirit come usually at night, and there's no real charge. I mean, people might bring wood for a fire or something, but I actually have experienced this with people from different communities, and it's just a whole other mindset around the exchange itself. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but the process work, the internal work, I think is extremely important for anyone who's doing any kind of spiritual guiding or teaching or psychological work for that matter, and coming to some understanding that, well, I don't live in an indigenous environment. I live in a society where I do have to have money to buy groceries. So it started to seem very logical and just fine to be charging money. And then, of course, I went through all the how much and all that stuff. And now I'm doing a lot of spiritual mentoring with people. I'm older, I'm in a different life situation, and I'm talking with people, and I don't really feel comfortable taking any money for that. That's just where it is. I operate intuitively, I always have. I don't expect that everyone would be like that necessarily, but I do just want to say that it's extremely important to do the internal process work and ask yourself all the hard questions about your own attitude towards money, what the different cultural conditioning has been for you, and then go for it. Then just see how it works the best for you and what feels the most ethical and honest in your situation.
Thank you so much, Linda. I love that. And I love the various nuances in there. In my training, my main spiritual training was in the Tibetan Buddhist system, where for the most part in my lineage, the lineage of the Dalai Lama, it was ordained monks and nuns who lived in monasteries, which were fully supported by the government. And even when the monasteries moved to India and America, it was a system. Now we're householders, right? I'm not a monk. I have children who need college paid for. I have a responsibility as a householder as well as a spiritual teacher to not abandon, my children, right? And to make sure their medical needs are cared. So you're reminding me of also the nuance of modernity of spiritual teachers living in the system that we're living. They're often householders, and so they have responsibilities to their family as well, which adds increased complexity. Yes. Thank you for that reminder, Linda. We have to be very, very aware of our own conditioning individually and socially around this too. Yes. I think who hasn't spoken, Ajda. Would you like to jump in here?
Hi. I just have like a few thoughts on this topic. When I started, I also didn't feel comfortable charging for what I was offering, so I actually put the prices quite low, and I thought, I think it's okay, I don't need more. But then what actually started happening was that people who were coming to the workshops, they started telling me, but like this was a little bit weird for me because it was such a low price, and we were kind of wondering, you know, how like bad this is going to be because it was such a low price. And then actually I spent a lot of time talking and thinking about this. And I started to notice, so I did not feel actually worthy of charging more, and I was very unsure about myself and what I'm offering. So what actually started happening was through the feedback from other people and through internal work, I started to see that the price that I was charging was like really too low. And now what I'm doing is that I'm just like checking in with myself when I'm putting out the price. Okay, how does this feel for me, for my heart, not for my mind or how much money I think I need, but how does it feel for, yeah, how does it intuitively feel, or does it feel that I am giving more, or is this like exchange kind of like equal? So yeah, I've rose up my prices a little bit, but yeah, I'm always doing it that I feel comfortable and I'm not like going too high so people are not able to afford it. But also, if people need it, I say, you know, I give different option and I say, you know, you can pay me whenever you have money. And yeah, I don't do everything just based on this money, but I feel it's important part of our lives also, and it kind of also reflects our self-worth in a way. This is how I feel for me.
Yes, yes. I think that may resonate with a lot of our experiences. And I really appreciate the spiritual leaders and teachers sharing your experience. This is what this is for. You know, a chance to share. This is what's worked. This hasn't. I found when I don't charge, people don't seem to value it as much. When I do charge, they value it more. So I charge, but I always provide options. This is what many of us have sort of landed at as we've gone forward. I'm David Spector. I'm going to call you out a bit, and I see you, Phil, too. You put a comment in the chat box. I wonder if you could just speak to that, if you don't mind me name checking you.
Which comment?
You're muted again, Kimberly.
You're muted, Kimberly.
Sorry, just you said, I'll read it, and maybe if you have something to add. I've taught clients for free when they had financial need in exchange for their giving me feedback on their experiences, which I love. Thank you for asking for feedback, very important. The result, no feedback. No evidence that they actually learned what was provided. When I charge for money, David says, people learn and often give positive feedback. So it seems I have to charge for money, just not a lot. That's a real life experience. Do you have anything you want to add to that or share about that, David?
No, I was reporting some actual experiences that I had back at the time when I felt that it was a good idea to teach people for free when they were living in their car, you know, when they actually could not afford $47. And found out that it was a mistake. So I don't do that anymore.
Okay.
I want the best experience for every client, and it's not a good experience if they don't value what they have enough to actually take the course.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's real life experience.
But I've gotten attacked frequently for charging money. I mean, school teachers in the public school system charge money. The school system itself charges money. Everybody charges money for their services. Why is it that because this is called spiritual, that all of a sudden I'm not allowed to charge money? There's something wrong with my charging money. It has never been satisfactorily explained to me.
Thank you, David. Thanks for letting me name check you there. I appreciate that. And David Buckland, I'm going to come to you in a minute as well and call you out, just giving you fair warning because I see some chat box comments here. Phil, do you want to jump in? And then we'll go to Stacy and Jeff as well, because I know you've had your hand up for a while.
Actually, not that long. I just wanted to add a dimension to this, and over the years I've had this kind of conversation with a great many spiritual teachers and also writers, because I'm both, and I know a lot of people who earn some aspect of their living as writers. There's the questions we've been focused on is how we feel about money, about issues around charging and how much. There's also the issues around what we have to do to earn our keep. We all know we need money to pay the bills. What are we willing to do to bring money in? And that's not just a question of whether to charge and how much to charge, but in many cases, it overlaps into areas of marketing and salesmanship and self-promotion. And what I found, I'm going to share a story that was transformative to me. What I realized especially in the years when I was struggling so much to make ends meet, is that I would always say, well, I had no interest in marketing myself, and I was not good at it, not good at self-promotion and all that. What I came to realize is it was not just a question of skill. It was that I actually held contempt for that. It was partly my upbringing and, in my working class family, but there was this doing something to promote yourself and sell yourself and market yourself seemed contemptuous. It seemed beneath me as both as a writer and a spiritual teacher and leader and all that. And the way I don't know if I've ever gotten over it, but a big moment was, I won't name names, but a family member who's a very business oriented and entrepreneurial. He said to me one day, "What do you actually do? How do you do what you do?" And I had to explain. He was most interested in the book end of things. And I explained, well, you write this and you get an agent and you sell it and you do this. And as a spiritual lecturer, I do this and I do that. And he says, "Oh, I get it. You run a small business." And my first reaction was, "Screw you. I'm not a businessman." That's an insult. But then he proceeded to explain to me by repeating what I said in business terms. You create an inventory, you do research and development. And he just spelled it all out as if I were running a small business. And I resisted it and I thought, God damn it, he's right. And that gave me permission to do some things I wouldn't have done before. I still have trouble with it. I still hate self-promotion and marketing and, find myself very envious of people who do those things well. But it's helpful to think about those things and not just money, but what we're willing to do to earn it and to put ourselves out there if we need to do that. Some people, it just happens for them, and I envy those people. We're business people.
Thanks, Phil. I can't relate at all. Oh, no. No. And it's good to see you also. Yeah. Jeff, you've had your hand up for a while. Why don't you jump in here?
All right, thanks, Kimberly. Boy, there is so much I could say. I think I'm going to write a book based on just this conversation. I haven't had as good a conversation as this as last time I watched My Dinner with Andre, if you all can relate to that. The thing that hasn't, and I'm blown away. And Kimberly, like you said, being a householder, like this is really hard. This is like talking about sex. I think it's even harder than talking about sex or politics. And the thing that I haven't heard said yet, and this one is very important for me, is how does, I mean, I've earned my living as a mediator, and I got paid a lot of money as a mediator, like being paid like a lawyer. And partly because nobody wants to do that. That's the market at work. Nobody wants to be in the middle of conflict. And I run a nonprofit now where we actually charge for very little because at the same time, I can relate to the comments about if we don't charge a lot for our workshops, are people going to come? But the thing that hasn't been said yet that I think about a lot because of lived experiences is when a spiritual teacher charges, and I feel like a lot of our spiritual life, for understandable reasons now, is about providing comfort, maybe a lot more than challenge. So how much does a spiritual teacher really end up not challenging? Now, if you're teaching meditation or breathing, there's like a method for that. But I also happen to think, and this may be controversial, one person's path to awakening is just their path. And it might be totally wrong for somebody else. But when we charge, the last thing we're going to do is say, get the F out of here. What you need is not what I'm offering. Or challenging them, and then we lose them as a paying customer. And so how much does one even subconsciously not challenge the students, not push them? Because we know for understandable reasons, we love our children. We want them to go to college. We need to feed them. And I'm just saying, I don't have an easy answer for this, but I really am concerned. And one other thought, and I love Shanti's comment about like when a teacher does voluntary poverty, they can be revered like a god, and this like sets up potential abuse. At the same time, the thought occurred to me, when a teacher gets paid for their spiritual services, and then they get paid even more, and then like people revere them and they're worth $500 an hour, is that also the slippery slope to, so I can do whatever I want because I am so valued. It's, dare I say, like our president saying, if I'm the president and I do it, it's not illegal. So I just worry that valuing can be a slippery slope towards a teacher going to abuse also, just like the voluntary poverty. And again, so I like what, Rick, what you were saying, like you delete interviews when you feel like a teacher's charging too much. So I don't know. I don't know the answers, but I had to just throw those thoughts out there.
Love it. Love it. And, Amara just made a point in the chat box too. If all we do here is come up with some really great points for inquiry, we've done well, and if all we do, in my mind, if something that we do here helps you help others, then we've done well. If this helps us be more aware of our issues around money and ethics around money, then we've done well. Yeah. Stacy, you've been really patient.
Thank you. So I'd also like to add another dimension to the conversation. Words like energetic intention, ethics, and consciousness. So what seems to be very pervasive out there in general is a tremendous amount of dishonesty, lack of transparency, people holding events for free, where the people attending the free portion of what's being offered receive very little value for the free portion, very little significant information. And if you want more, there's upsell opportunities. And in the pervasive consciousness, it's about offering something for free to get a lot of people to come, to get them to buy the upsell to make a lot of money. So, as someone who's spiritual, I take a look at that and say, okay, so my energetic intention is to be of service first. And I believe that being of service, the money will follow. My beliefs around ethics and honesty and transparency is that even if I'm offering something for free, it has to have real significant value to the people who are attending. And rather than have the mindset of, quote, upsell opportunities, to use marketing lingo, I look at it as an opportunity. Yes, I will be making more money for those who choose to engage in those opportunities, but it really is an exchange of value, perceived value and given value. So it's really important to me to operate with a focus on service and a consciousness of operating on a real honest and transparent level. And I believe that on some deep level, conscious or unconscious, people are going to get that. Now, having said that, the wall that I have come up against time and time again with my offerings is that because dishonesty and trickery is so pervasive, people have become very skeptical, to the point where, when someone really authentic comes along, how do they know that? How do they discern that? And I've tried to communicate that to the best of my ability through marketing. You will get real value and all that sort of thing. But I haven't found the most effective way yet to sort of combat the tremendous amount of skepticism that's out there, to get high numbers attending events and communicating that through marketing in an honest and transparent way. So that's been my experience.
Hey, Stacy, thank you. Brecht, love to hear from you. Thanks for being patient.
Hello. It's good to be here. I'm joining you from Belgium, and I first want to express gratitude that I can attend here. I might be a bit younger than most of you, and I don't know if I consider myself a spiritual teacher. I'm a teacher for sure, but then I came to witness in the last years that what I was teaching was, reproducing suffering, because I was reproducing the systems that were causing suffering, so that led me on a path of exploration. And currently I think, in a process of grieving, of not having the elders that can guide me through these questions. So finding a place, finding community of elders or inspiring elders is warming my heart. So that's something. And to bring the link to the topic that we're discussing, for me, the place that I'm creating very much blurs the divide between student and teacher, because I want to create a place where we can all teach and all learn, and we honor the fact that everybody is, as Hermann Hesse says, a potential of the divine and is ever becoming. So I really like the comment about making it context specific, and maybe I want to add something, also make it, instead of making it an extra next to the spiritual teaching, why don't we see it as an extra thing to wrestle with? And depending on who we're wrestling with, our attitude towards money can change, depending on if you want the level of consciousness or where people are at in their lives in general. For some people, money can be a great teacher, and then we can play it out, and we can provoke the money issue and use it as a teacher. And for other people, it's not the core, and then we can have a completely other script. But I maybe want to invite for myself a lot of flexibility, and not trying to find procedures for myself in the future that I will apply standard to every encounter. Yeah, and the last thing is I learned a lot from one of my teachers that said, "Yeah, Brecht, what you're trying to bring to the world is beautiful, but I can." And he was very provoking me there. He was saying, like, I can sense a sense of martyrship here. You wanna save the poor, but what if somebody wants to offer you 30,000 euros for your teaching? Can you sit with that? Is it gonna corrupt you? Are you able to hold that money and not change what your heart and your soul is calling you to do? So he was inviting me to accept money, and a lot of it, as a challenge, and then inviting me to find ways to redistribute it in beautiful ways. So maybe I can pass on this teaching that I meditated on a lot. Thank you for listening.
Oh, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you so much. Very glad you're here. And I was a young teacher once myself. And one of the most important things we can do is be in a community, which is what we're really seeking to do here at the ASI, and to provide this peer support for each other and peer education for each other. Yeah, you know, I'm a Vajrayana practitioner, and some of you know what that is, but it's Tibetan Buddhist Tantra. And in Tantra, just sharing again as Kimberly for a minute, we utilize money and sex and power. We don't turn away from it. And how much more can a bodhisattva, a warrior saint, do with money in the world if it is ethically sound, right? What could you do with that $30,000 to help people versus not able to pay our electric bill, right? And in total survival mode. And again, I'm being purposefully inciting here, right? But these are questions for us to consider, right? How much more could we help people, right? If we are secure and have our survival needs taken care of, and actually maybe even are abundant, and then where are the checks and balances? Where can that easily get corrupted? Where does this become market? I even refuse to call, some of you know here, I refuse to call my work. I call it WERK. I refuse to call it a business because it's not a business. It's not a business. And I'm not seeking to grow it at all. And somehow for me, I'm finding my way forward by putting these frameworks and these boundaries in the work myself and changing it. It's constantly evolving, right? It's constantly changing and evolving as we as spiritual teachers and leaders go out into this money economy, into this system, and bring value to it. I mean, this system needs us. We need our spiritual teachers. We need our spiritual leaders out there in the world thriving and communicating more than ever, right? More than ever. So let's see, Rick, I'm going to come to you in a minute. Where is he? Where is he? David Buckland, would you jump in here and give us your thoughts?
Oh, thanks, Kimberly. I can just share my experience with this process, and it matches what a lot of people have said, but I started off by giving everything free. And I have a very large blog and so forth. I released a book, and that basically requires a payment simply because of the way the system works, print on demand and all that. But what I found with the coaching and mentoring work that I was doing was that when I didn't charge, there wasn't the same, people didn't give it the same value. They didn't show up. They got into, they wanted to argue, or this kind of thing. I didn't find the same, it didn't attract the kind of clients that I was interested in working with, so to speak, I guess you could say. And so I started charging a nominal amount, and since then that cleared up, and people are valuing that normally show up and attracting clients that are of use. More recently, I ran into a marketing program. Again, for me, that's a weak area for me, like as is for many of us, I think. And the whole first part of the program was working on our obstacles to putting ourselves out there. I think a lot of people who are spiritually oriented tend to be somewhat inner directed, introverts even. And so it's not in our nature to want to put ourselves out there. But that's what marketing is about. And there's ways of doing it for more introverted type of or introverted types of people, and doing it with integrity and sincerity and so on like that. And in fact, that's how you do it, is people are looking for sincerity and integrity in the marketplace, because there's a lot of noise out there, and they're trying to find the quality in the ocean. So yeah, and it's certainly been a learning experience, because I found I've had a lot of stuff about money and about charging and about putting myself out there and all that kind of thing. So it's been a whole process, and it's still underway.
Indeed, it's been a whole process and it's still underway. A lot of us can relate to that. I'm going to go to Rick for a minute. And as we've got about 15 or so minutes left, I'd love you to all think about what's really worked for you, or what have you seen work? And again, none of it, it's all going to be right, our own context and cultures and systems and countries and institutions and traditions and non-traditions, et cetera. But what are some best practices that we can really share with each other, and we can, shall I say, take to the bank? Maybe that's too soon. Maybe that's too soon. Anyway, Rick.
Yeah, one thing that I'm feeling as we have this conversation is that we shouldn't be looking for a one-size-fits-all solution. Obviously, everybody has different circumstances, and we need to come up with something that works for us. In my case, it was, doing interviews, and I just had this feeling that I wanted to make them free. I didn't want any kind of paywall, and I would want to grow it to the point where, the tiny percentage who feel to donate, like NPR, they actually donate, and that would enable me to quit my day job and only do this. And it took 8 years or something to get to that point. But that wouldn't work for everybody else. Everybody else doesn't have big numbers out there. They need some kind of support. I interviewed a guy named Eli Recht recently, who is a therapist of some sort, and he makes pretty good money doing that. But then for his spiritual teaching, he doesn't charge anything, but he encourages donations, and he gives all the donations to a local animal shelter. So since my interview with him, he's donated $3,000 to a local animal shelter. So that's a model. But if he kept the money, I wouldn't, belittle him for doing that. But that's what he wants to do. There's a guy named Lauren Huff, who's a friend of David Buckland's, and I attended a retreat up on Vancouver Island with him. And his policy was you paid for what it cost him to pay the retreat center. And then on top of that, if you wanted to donate something to him, that would be his compensation, but no one was obligated. So there's another model. So there are probably 1,000 different ways of doing it. But I think that in conclusion, one thing that there should be some kind of fundamental common denominator which would tie in with ASI in terms of the ethics or the integrity of what you're doing. You're not like that one guy I mentioned with the $900,000, taking somebody's inheritance. When he found out this guy had that money, he said, "Oh my God, this money has Asuric influences in it, and it's so good you told me about it, because if you give it to me, I'll purify it for you, and it'll save you terrible karma that would otherwise result." So yikes. So that is totally unethical. So there needs to be a sort of an ethical foundation to whatever model we craft to have it work for us. And that is not a given, because in many cases it hasn't been ethical. And so as members of the ASI, that should probably be our first motivation or incentive. And then we can build something that works for us on top of that.
Yes. Go ahead, Marnie.
Yeah, hi. Kimberly, in response to your question about thinking of best practices or what have you, so I just experimented with something very recently, as in 2 weeks ago. And so far I have the response has been good. I am a certified divorce coach, and I work primarily with women who are moms who are going through that very tough transition. And when I got my coaching certificate, and education, which took quite some time, there was a whole session or two devoted to how to market yourself and what to charge and da 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 da. And that was like 3 or 4 years ago, and I've always struggled with that. So I came up with this number that I was going to charge, and it was going to be this amount for 6 sessions. Okay, however you want to do it. And the purpose behind that is when you're going through a divorce for the first time, it's a process. You want to at least start with more than one. And what I found, in more cases than not, very few people would renew after those 6 sessions, because a lot of the women who are going through divorce don't have money. Okay, it's tied up. I know, I've been there myself. That's why I'm doing what I do. So I decided, and it was right around the time that I heard about this event, actually right after I heard about this event. So it's all very timely. I decided when we finished that 6th session, I was going to leave it to her, and I was going, and rather than saying, I said to her, I said, you can do 6 sessions, or we can, now that you've done 6, we can do individual sessions. Okay. Now that you know how the system and the coaching works. And I could just feel it. And she said, okay, great, I'll get back to you. And I said, terrific. And I said, just so you know, my hourly fee is this. But I said, that might be a little much. I'm willing to come down to this. She said, oh, great, great, great. And I said, but I don't want you to say great to that. I want you to come back to me and tell me what works for you. And in the meantime, let's set up an appointment, and you can get back to me before that to confirm. Well, we did that. And she came back and she said, the fee that you are willing to offer me works well. I said, great. So we had our session. At the end of that session, at the beginning of the session, she says, well, do you want me to pay you for 3 right now? And I said, no, we're going to do 1 session at a time, and we're going to see how you feel. And she said, well, I probably can't do 3 because I'm going away, blah, blah, blah. Well, we had our second session today. And I said, do you want to continue? She goes, oh my God, yes. So it made me feel really good. And I told her, I said, well, the next session, I said, you don't pay today. You pay for today, but you don't pay that until we do it. And there was a sense, I felt like I was giving something, and I was respecting her, and she felt that. And it made me feel so good. And the response was, yeah, I'm going to do another one. Now, who knows how many more she'll do? That's irrelevant. But I took myself out of that formulaic, this is how you have to do it, because that's, to my point about doctors earlier, that's how everyone does it, including me. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to let it be and see what happens. And in this case, it worked beautifully. I don't know about the next case, but I do know that this is a practice that I'm going to repeat when my clients come in. So I wanted to share that.
Wonderful, wonderful context. Yeah, it is going to be to a point that just came in, and other people have said the ethical approach, the right approach is going to be very context dependent, right? It's going to depend on lots of different things. And can we be transparent with it? You know, if one of the things you'll hear me say so often is every spiritual teacher or leader should be reporting to somebody, should have checks and balances, should have a board or have something outside of their own institution that they're getting feedback on, so we don't get those problems that we so often see, and that really can help us get the feedback we need to stay ethical. Chrisanne.
Well, as preparation for this meeting, I work as an admin for the ASI, and one of the board members asked me to start keeping track of statistics on membership and webinars and sort of where the ASI's income comes from. And there have been many discussions in ASI, even before I came on the scene, whether membership is charged for, membership isn't charged for, or how to self-sustain the organization. So some of the statistics that I've been able to collect are about 5% of people donate when they sign up for membership. And when we offer the webinars, it's between about 18 and 40% donate for the webinars. So even within ASI, there's still the discussion, you know, how do we handle membership? Do we offer tiered membership? Do we have a free membership and then offer additional services? So in the understanding, when individuals are in their own practice, somehow the finances need to be self-sustaining, as within an organization or sort of any services that are offered. So I just wanted to share that even internally we have discussions about this all the time.
Thank you so much. Yes. Okay, Wallace, love to hear from you. Oh, and you're muted, but I think you know that. There we go.
I'm aware of approaching the end of the call, and I just thought I'd pop in and share a few things that may be relevant to some people here. My own spiritual community is tremendous energy of unconditional love in it. And what I have discovered is it's the unconditional love present in our community which does the healing. Not me as a spiritual teacher, the unconditional love. And we are all creators of that unconditional love, mainly because there's no money involved. That's the truth of it. And, you know, unconditional love is an energy, and it's very powerful. And it's an energy that I feel spiritual leaders, spiritual teachers and spiritual leaders can really tap into if they make what they're doing truly unconditionally loving. Now, how do you do that? Well, one of the way I've a lot on my website about how to do this, you know, and one of the ways is to design your service in such a way that it's incredibly efficient. For example, the service I have supplies spiritual teaching to around 33 people. It has 3 facilitators, 2 spiritual teachers, and myself. And it costs nobody anything, but it's in the way it's designed. It's designed to be very, very efficient. It uses technology to become very efficient. And it's a lot of creativity went into the grassroots constructing of it. So for example, we have facilitators who are very effective at what they do, but they require a minimum of training because we have a lot of online tools. With for example, one of our online tools is with 29 workshops that teach the skills of mastering any of the 29 biggest life challenges that human beings have. And that's only one of our tools. And the facilitators, their job is to help the people on the website use the tools of the website and to support them with unconditional love. And that makes a huge difference. They don't have to be particularly skilled or anything to do that. And then we train them in how to support them with unconditional love.
Wonderful.
With the tools that are on the website. So
thank you so much,
want
Wallace.
to share that because I've never heard of anybody doing this, anybody else. And if anybody wants, it's all online and it's freely available.
Thank you so much, Wallace. Appreciate our Irish representation. John, would love to hear from you.
Thank you. I thought I would just mention that I come in part from the perspective of someone who has been practicing law for over 40 years, and so deal with, and in particular, trust and estates law. So that's all about inheritance. And that in turn means that necessarily I'm dealing all the time with wealth in whether it's the form of money or things, but it's material wealth. I can make all sorts of comments about the relationships and the parallels between the practice of law and the practice of spiritual teaching, mentoring, writing, and so forth. Everything from the ethics to how we charge money, charge for, for what we do and all of that. But I just thought that I would mention that from my perspective, with respect to clients, that's another side, of course, of all of this, and that is the client's, or customer, if you want to call it that, relation to money and wealth and how they look at it. And one thing I've certainly found, can't use, I don't have a big number of statistics, but it does seem from my experience over the years dealing with controversies and so forth and so on, that it, as others have said, it's not money that is the problem. I think, Kimberly, you brought up, and it's very, very true, money is a completely neutral thing that happens to be very, very complex. It is the relationship with money and with wealth, or the lack of it, that is really the issue, whether from our points of view as providers or the points of views of the clients. I certainly have found those that, again, I don't have statistics, but I'm sure this is true, and that is that the non-controversial situations are almost definitely ones where the people who are dealing with either the expectation of getting money or doling it out because they're the trustee or whatever, they're grounded. They have a perspective that is healthy about this. And so for the most part, we sort of are not really worrying so much about it. It's the ones who are not personally grounded, don't have discernment. And this is not to make a judgment. I'm just speaking in a generic way. That's where the problem comes in. So just thought that I would kind of toss that out to kind of add to the mix here. One other point that I will make, and that is, at least, maybe it's because of my practice background and being spiritual too, I have no problem with materialism being a part of my spirituality. But again, that's a matter of perspective. So there you go.
Appreciate that a lot, John, and also your legal view on this. So just to clarify, so when you're saying what you're looking grounded, you're talking about in the spiritual teacher, in the spiritual community. Is that what you mean by grounded? Can you share?
I think so. And again, it's a very kind of generic kind of point, but that is that if we're grounded within ourselves, it seems to me, then we're in a better position to make all sorts of decisions. In the material world, the spiritual world, the mix of the two. And then also the clients, the client who's making that decision about whether to select one type of fee structure or a different kind of fee structure, donation structure, what their comfort level is. Everyone's going to be different in some way. They're going to bring their expectations or not have any because they don't have any prior experience with it. And so and again, we as providers are, among other things, teaching about why we do what we do, including, what our basis is for charging if we're going to charge.
That's right. That's right. Wonderful. Well, what a wonderful place to end on that grounded point. I really appreciate you jumping in there and everybody's perspective and the zest that you brought. And may this time together in some way, just feeling this energy all across, we're all over in different parts of the world right now, in different times, in different places. And may this somehow, this connection, this light connection between us all, may this be of benefit to the world in some way. May this be of benefit to the waking up process and the growing up process for all of us humans around the world. So thank you so much for joining us. This recording will be available on the ASI in the coming weeks. Please make a donation to the ASI, which is definitely in need of it. I'll tell you, it's definitely in need of it. So for sustainability, if this was helpful for you, please do make a donation online. It's transparent and going to good places. You can trust that. So, and we'll see you next time for the next conversation. Thanks
And
so much.
thank you, Kimberly, for the skillful facilitation.
You're welcome, Phil. I love it. Sending love to you all. See you next time. Bye.